All right, lovely. Thank you for joining me once again. We were dealing with Muhammad Ali still, just because why not? This is a longer form video that Muhammad's put together here. It's 19 minutes and 54 seconds. So let's see how quickly I can put it right where he's got it wrong. Spoiler. By the way, boys and girls, it's going to be everywhere, isn't it? All right, Muhammad, off you go.
Cholesterol. Do we need cholesterol? Yes, you absolutely need cholesterol. You would, in fact, die without cholesterol. I'm
Good so far.
Dr. Allen, I'm a board-certified cardiologist.
Dear, oh dear, Dr. Allen, is it? Hello, Dr. Allen.
And we're here to talk.
Yeah, board certification in a given topic doesn't actually make you an expert in that topic, Muhammad. As I've said previously, in this country at least, I can get a certificate if I want to that nominates me as a woman. Does that make it so? Logist, the suffix logist, means one who studies, one who adds to the knowledge, one who is an expert in this field, learned in this field. You, Muhammad, are not that. You don't have a record as a peer-reviewed publisher, a scientist in your own regard at all. What you have is the certification by a controlling board, which allows you to do stuff like stick stents into people. You're not an expert in why they might need stenting in the first place, or indeed whether or not stenting is indicated either. Actually, you're a trained monkey. What's next?
About cholesterol. All of the nonsense that you've heard online about cholesterol is going to be debunked right now, right here. Yeah.
I doubt that, Muhammad. By you? No, because you have no idea what you're talking about in this regard, whatever.
Yes, we're going to talk about these guys, lipoproteins, what they do. We're going to talk about the absorption of cholesterol, dietary cholesterol, eating cholesterol, how your body makes cholesterol, how we can improve it, how we can get rid of it, how much is too much, how little is too much. Do you need cholesterol to make hormones? What if cholesterol is oxidized or not oxidized? Does the size of these things matter?
Well, Muhammad, yes. Depending on what these things is meant to represent. That's a lot to chew off in a less than 20-minute video, Muhammad. How can you possibly do justice to any of those topics in that time frame? You can't.
A lot of people talk about size. Do you need damage to your arterial wall, and is cholesterol just patching it up or not? That's what we're here to talk about today. So let's get started. This is going to be like a crash course in cholesterol and lipid metabolism by an actual cardiologist.
No, by a bloke that's got a certificate that says he is one. A bloke that actually has contributed, as far as I can tell, 2 or fewer peer-reviewed publications on any topic, whatever, let alone that of cardiology specifically, Muhammad. No.
Who looks inside your arteries? That is literally my job.
Looking inside someone's arteries does not mean you understand why those arteries might be in the state that they may be in or not. It's just looking at something.
So first of all, these are called lipoproteins.
No, that's a model.
Lipoproteins are balls that are proteins that are filled with lipids. Inside each one of these is this yellow material, is cholesterol ester, and then the turquoise is triglycerides. On the outside of this is this blue marker. This blue marker, at least in this model, we'll call it an ApoB, apolipoprotein B. Mm-hmm. That is what is found on most cholesterol lipoprotein particles. So
sure.
An LDL particle has an ApoB, a VLDL, an IDL, and the chylomicrons even have B lipoproteins. And HDL has these. Let's just point to, maybe this green one here. This is an ApoA1. ApoA1 is found on an HDL particle, and we'll get to the difference. Now, cholesterol in and of itself is neither good nor bad. You cannot say HDL cholesterol is good or LDL cholesterol is bad.
Correct, good.
Cholesterol in and of itself, of an HDL or an LDL, is no different. It's the same cholesterol. However, the molecule that carries it around, whether it's an ApoB, an LDL molecule, or an ApoA1, or an HDL molecule, those aren't necessarily neither good or bad either, because an LDL particle, for example, part of its lifespan, it is delivering cholesterol to your arteries and dropping it off in there and destroying your arteries.
No, false. It's doing no such thing at all. What an absolute load of rubbish. You were doing great right up until that point, and then you dropped that ridiculous clanger there. False, Muhammad.
But a huge part of its lifespan, it is connecting with an HDL, connecting to it and taking cholesterol out, helping your HDL particles. HDL generally remove cholesterol from your arterial wall. They link up with an LDL, and then the LDL delivers it back to the liver for elimination. So let's talk about that process a little bit. How do we eliminate cholesterol? Obviously, it ends up in your intestines, and that's how you get rid of it. So,
right. So if you consume more cholesterol than your body needs right now, and it chooses not to absorb that for later use for the evil machinations of maintaining homeostasis, etc., then it will simply excrete that excess cholesterol out. Fantastic. Good.
How does cholesterol end up in your intestines? There's about 3 different ways that cholesterol ends up in your intestines, and we'll go through this and kind of where cholesterol comes from and how it goes. So, cholesterol can end up in your intestines from you eating it. When you eat cholesterol, some of it, a lot of it, almost all of it will end up in your intestines. That's one way that it happens. The second way is your liver making it. Your liver will make cholesterol, dump it into micelles or bile acids or bile salts, and then those, they kind of look like lipoproteins. Those end up in your intestine. That's the majority of the way.
How? You left a lot of detail out there.
This is your liver making cholesterol. The other way...
You said that, but you didn't tell us how that liver-made cholesterol ended up in the intestines.
That it gets there is all of the cells in your body making cholesterol, returning it to the liver, and then the liver packaging it up into micelles, which then dump into your intestines. So those are the 3 ways. You either ate it, your liver made it, or it collected back into your liver from all of the cells in your body. Now, make no mistake, every cell in your body makes its own cholesterol. You do not need to eat cholesterol. You do not need to eat saturated fat to raise your cholesterol. Cholesterol all gets made by every cell in your body.
Bingo. According to the instructions of the DNA, that DNA being the absolute peak of evolution to this point, a point which is at least 3,800 million years. The genes have this sorted. They know what they're doing in this regard. Good.
You don't need the building blocks. You don't need saturated fat. You don't need cholesterol. You don't need...
Saturated fat is not particularly a building block for cholesterol, Muhammad. The building block of cholesterol actually is acetyl coenzyme A. That's how early in the tree the synthesis of cholesterol begins. All right?
Need any of that. You just need an acetate and a citrate molecule, which every cell makes. And without cholesterol, cells would not be fluid. Let's say this was a cell. These yellow things on the outside of it in the membrane, these yellow little cholesterols, those are cholesterols that are free cholesterol. Those make the fluid membrane more pliable or more flexible, more fluid. And without it, we would be dead. So without cholesterol, we would be dead. So absolutely, you do need cholesterol. Now, the question is, how much is too much? So,
right. Question. Because if science was able to provide us with a definitive answer to that, Muhammad, then it wouldn't be a question anymore, would it? So there's your first clue, kids.
Over a certain particle or concentration gradient.
Okay, what? What certain concentration gradient are you referring to? Give us a number.
Then it is too much.
Too much refers to a measurement, an amount, an aliquot of something. How much? How much is too much, Muhammad?
So most of, like if you look at the guidelines, most of the guidelines...
No. Guidelines are someone's opinion, Muhammad. We need to see some evidence of how much is too much and what the mechanism of that being too much is. Can you show us that? Should we wait? Yes, that's what I thought.
Guidelines say that LDL cholesterol needs to be under 100 milligrams per deciliter.
Okay, so that is your opinion, Muhammad. And it's not a very good one. The totality of extant inference regarding this issue tells us a number of things. It tells us absolutely definitively that it is inappropriate to state that LDL is causal in heart disease. The same is true for ApoB protein specifically. It tells us that people who are experiencing atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, who are admitted to hospital with such disease, are expressing normal distributions of all the lipoproteins, thus dismissing any idea of a dose-response relationship being extant in the objective reality in which we find ourselves. It also tells us that with the largest data set available on this topic, that the level of total cholesterol associated with the lowest rate of mortality from all causes and from every important sub-cause is 220 milligrams per deciliter of blood, Muhammad, which would have an LDL proportion of that, quite likely being well in excess of your opinion as to where you think it should be, without providing any evidence in support of your claim, as usual.
For all comers, right? We know that when newborns are born, and based on various lab studies and tests and multiple results, that somewhere around 20 to 40 is considered physiologic.
By whom? Is considered by whom, Muhammad? That's not very scientific. You're just giving us some people's opinion again.
So above that number, above about 20 or 40.
Well, which number? Because you're now giving us a definitive statement about something that's going to happen above that number, but you're not even telling us what that number is. So is it 20 or is it 40 or is it 30 or is it somewhere in between?
That's when cholesterol starts being deposited into your arteries.
Nope. Not at all.
And then the longer this goes on for many, many decades, the worse the outcomes. That's kind of what happens.
Now, great sciencing there, Muhammad. We've skipped over the whole area here, the whole complete lack of any science underpinning anything you've just said there. There is no evidences that you can point to of an acceptable scientific standard which would lead me to believe anything you've had to say. And your certificate from the folks and the fine folks in the US health system that think you're a cardiologist doesn't impress me one way or the other on this. What doesn't impress me even more than that is everything you've got to say, pretty much, Muhammad.
And I'll go through a model, shortly showing you how that works. So
no, you won't.
That's what we need to know. LDL needs to be under 100 for the
No, it doesn't. Not at all. No.
Most part. If you have risk factors, like you're a smoker, you're diabetic, you're obese, things like that, you want to be under 70.
No, you don't. Completely false. That's just Muhammad's opinion, and maybe an opinion that is shared by others in his field of endeavor as well, by the way. It's not just his opinion, but it is just an opinion. And it's a false one because there is no science underpinning it. There is no reason to take these guidelines remotely seriously, is what I'm telling you.
To prevent that from happening, because it's worse. We know that LDL cholesterol above 60, you're probably laying down plaque.
And we also know that people are laying down plaque individually at much lower levels than that as well. We also know that those plaques that are developing are not developing evenly across the surface of the lumen side of the arterial tree. We don't find that at all. We only find that atheroscleroses are developing where we would expect them to develop, were the reason for the disease actually largely mechanical, Muhammad. That's what we actually do find when we actually look at the disease process, among other things. But you You're the expert, though, son. Double professor. Go on.
For those of you who've had a heart attack or had a stroke or had a cardiovascular event, we want to be under 55.
No, you don't. Still.
And if you keep having repeat heart attacks and stents and open heart surgery and other kind of issues, then you probably want to be under 40.
No, you don't, because LDL, nor cholesterol, nor ApoB were the cause of the atherosclerotic lesioning in the first instance. And so maintaining target levels of this physiological variable by artificially intervening in some way will not actually net a benefit. Of course it won't.
According to the European and American guidelines.
So some more opinion pieces from some people. Some opinion pieces which are bought and paid for. Shall we have a look at that conflict of interest on that European panel again, Mohammed, just to see how completely fair-minded, scientifically based, and not at all compromised by money these people were. Good. What's next?
And that is about what the interpretation is amongst most cardiology societies. And
all right, so okay, appeals to authority, appeals to consensus, opinions, but absolutely zero science. Good, Mohammed.
Groups. So now the next question is: do you need cholesterol to make hormones? A lot of
Well, why is that the next question? That cholesterol plays a myriad roles in human metabolism, in the human body, in the running of a human body. We've already really covered this. You've already quite correctly, it's the only thing I've ever heard you say, Mohammed, that was correct. You've quite correctly said that cholesterol is vital. So what's next?
people online will tell you that you need cholesterol to make testosterone and estrogen and progestin and cortisol and all this. First of all, none of that is true. LDL cholesterol is completely unneeded for any of that. Your testicles can make their own hormones. You do not need to help them. You don't need to eat saturated fat.
So again, you're conflating the lipoprotein carrier with cholesterol, Mohammed. Ergo, your whole construction here is completely fallacious. You are setting up a straw man and knocking that down. And we're all supposed to be impressed by your stunning knowledge, are we? I'm not.
You don't need to eat cholesterol. You don't need any of that.
We've already covered this. We understand that.
They need a citrate and an acetate.
Yes, you've already said that too, remember? The brain fog's incredible with these buffoons, isn't it?
Make all the cholesterol that they want. Now, in very rare incidents, these are called steroidogenic tissues, like your ovaries, your adrenals, your testicles. In very rare instances, if an organ like your testicles, for example, or ovaries needed more cholesterol to synthesize hormones, they would actually get it from an HDL particle. HDL using a receptor called the SRCB1, it can grab the HDL, bring it in, take its cholesterol, and use that cholesterol. Super rare case, but that would be the case. It would use an HDL, not an LDL. So we can bring people's LDLs down to pretty low.
The delivery mechanism has no impact on what is delivered, cholesterol, which you've already correctly said is identical in either case. And from that point forward, the metabolism has no way of knowing it's any different because it's the same stuff. So again, with the straw man, this is what I'm saying. This is absolutely vacuous, ridiculous nonsense from this Dunning-Kruger sufferer of the highest order. Glad to see that we've given up on using the filter that alters our appearance, by the way.
And your testosterone levels would stay pretty high and be almost completely unaffected. So the next question is, what about oxidation?
Why is that the next question after your little straw man incident there?
Do we need to check oxidation levels of these? Do we need to know if it's LDL oxidized? So this was something that was back from the 1990s and early 2000s where we thought oxidized LDL made a difference. Now, mind you, oxidized LDL, once it's inside the arterial wall, does matter. But oxidized LDL in circulation does not matter.
What do you mean by inside the arterial wall there, Mohammed? Be clear as to exactly what you're talking about.
Your liver and your immune system will eliminate it immediately. So the labs noticed that doctors wanted to order these tests, or there was some research around it, so labs started offering this test. Doctors ordered it. Turned out to be a nonsense marker. And I'll put all the studies in the links below. So if you want to look at these studies in great detail, you can click on the links below and read these.
The funny thing about all of that, though, Mohammed, is that you yourself are statistically incompetent. You've already shown that in a couple of shorts where you have claimed that there is sufficient evidence to state unequivocally a causal relationship between LDL-C and heart disease. The only possible way a person could possibly fall into that folly is to be themselves completely destitute of understanding of science, statistical inference, research design, the disciplines of the scientific process, basically, which would be underpinned by a person with basically no background in that field, which is what Muhammad Alo is. He's a DO that runs a cath lab and is a double professor. Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. Yes, also a bit fragile, apparently. Anyway, carry on, double professor.
So that was that. It turns out oxidized LDL is not an issue. Ordering a lab test for oxidized LDL is just going to throw you off, and it's a bunch of nonsense. So do not do that. It makes absolutely no difference. The next question is, does size matter? There's a lot of these people, and it was based on data and science.
Data and science, two things about which, Mohammed, you have not the first notion or clue. You are not qualified to comment on data or science. Not one jot.
We used to think that smaller LDL particles can get into your arterial wall easier and cause more atherosclerosis.
There you go with the cause claim again. Lipoproteins do not cause cardiovascular disease by way of atherosclerotic lesioning, Mohammed. This is very straightforward. If these lipoproteins were a causal agent in atherosclerosis, then atherosclerotic lesioning would occur across the entire inner surface of the arteries and the veins. That does not occur. We are done here. We are finished with the implication even of a causal relationship. Goodness gracious, why is it so difficult for people to get their head around? Woohoo! Ooh. Ooh. Yes. Take your HMG coenzyme A reductase inhibitors, folks. Absolutely. Fill your boots with them. They have no effect on your body in a negative way, so we're told.
Which it is actually true.
Even though they are, by their very design, a contraindicated metabolic toxin. Yeah. They interfere with your ability to produce ubiquinol, otherwise known as coenzyme Q10. Wow. Okay, anyway, what's next? Among other things, by the way, there are many other pathways by which that ridiculous contraindicated poisonous garbage is absolutely contraindicated. Like, here's another example. How about an 11,800% increase, relative, in the incidence of ALS in statin-taking populations as compared to their non-statin-taking controls? Word used advisedly. Controls, tee. All right, how about that? For example. Right, what's next?
Smaller particles can get in easier, but anything under 70 nanometers can get into your arterial wall pretty easily, and these are like 20, maybe 22.
It's almost like they're supposed to be able to.
224 at the most, and like 18 to 19 at the least. They're all within that 20 nanometer range, which is well below the 70 threshold. So all of these will get in. Now, I will tell you, larger, more buoyant, LDL particles carry more cholesterol. They have more cholesterol inside them, whereas the smaller ones have less cholesterol inside them. So if the bigger ones get in and the little ones get in, the bigger ones have more cholesterol inside them per molecule, like per particle of LDL.
There we get it, but so what?
There's more cholesterol in the larger ones.
Yes, we understand, but so what?
So some of these people online say, well, they're large and fluffy. So no one in the scientific community or cardiology community describes LDL particles as large and fluffy. That's just...
So what? You're appealing to your own authority again there, sunshine.
Just a nonsense term. When you know...
So is the whole concept that you put forward, Mohammed, that LDL is somehow causal in heart disease when it is demonstrably not. Okay?
What is somebody calling these large and fluffy? You know they're not scientific, or they're just trying to fool you and prey on your insecurities. And
tell us all about insecurity, Mohammed. Tell us all about it.
Prey on your lack of knowledge. These are not
double professor.
Large and fluffy. They're either more buoyant and less dense, or they are more dense and less buoyant. They're not large, they're not fluffy, they're not small.
Yes, you've made your point. And once again, it's vacuous.
So ignore all the people that are saying...
Ignore everyone except people with certificates from your authority that says you're a cardiologist, even though you are not, Mohammed. Nobody is a logist of anything with 2 peer-reviewed publications in any field, or fewer. The 2 I found might not even be you, son. All right? No. You have no business talking about science. Your job is sticking stents into people who have disease process. Okay? Brain monkey.
Saying that because they literally have no idea what on earth they're talking about. Now,
projection. Good.
The next question is, do you need arterial damage? Do you need damage to the arterial wall in order for these things to get in? Well, those studies have been done too. And
the answer is no, you don't. Tell you what, though, when you do have damage to your arterial wall, that's going to attract more lipoprotein carriers of cholesterol. Absolutely, of course it is. But that's still not the cause of the disease process.
1995, Williams and Tabas did a study looking at what if we damage the arterial wall and then look to see if there was any atherosclerosis. So it turned out they actually went in and mechanically, using like a scraper, would scrape the endothelium inside your arteries and see if the atherosclerosis developed there, and it did not. So that was thrown out the window. We spent the next 20 years trying to figure out what actually did happen.
Well, why did it take you so long to work things out, Mohammed, I wonder? Because you've still got it wrong. You're still nowhere near the right answer as to what the cause of atherosclerotic lesioning inside arteries is. let's go back to the patterning of the development of these lesions. That's where the answer is, Mohammed. If you've actually got more than 3 brain cells to rub together, that's probably why you haven't got to the right conclusion yet, thinking about it.
It turned out you actually needed intact endothelium for atherosclerosis to happen. So while, let's say this is the artery, you go in and scratch this area does not end up getting atherosclerosis, but healthy intact endothelium next door did get atherosclerosis. So if we infuse rabbits or humans even with very high levels of LDL cholesterol.
How high is very high? And anytime you're using an animal that's not a human as your model, that unlinks your ability to extrapolate your findings necessarily to humans. So it's all just theology, waffle, pseudoscience, disinformation, and propaganda. Okay?
You can cause atherosclerosis within hours. They have fatty streaks within hours.
Fatty streaks is not atherosclerosis. Fatty streaks is fatty streaks, and there are several reasons why fatty streaks develop as a first line of defense in the acute phases of this injury process.
But the scratched up or damaged endothelium did not. So
yeah, but what makes you think that the cause of atherosclerosis is arteries getting scratched up? It isn't. So this whole model is complete nonsense, Mohammed. As is your claim to be a competent lipidologist, cardiologist, cardiovascular pathophysiologist, any of those things. You're not, clearly.
It was only the intact endothelium that had these issues. And we notice this when we go in and do cardiac catheterizations and we use these very fancy types of imaging techniques called optical coherence tomography or intravascular ultrasound. You can see the actual soft plaque inside of the arteries. So the endothelium has to be completely intact in order for this to happen. So the next question becomes, how do we know it's the LDL? How do we know that LDL cholesterol causes atherosclerosis? So
we don't is the correct, scientifically valid and robust answer. It's the only possible answer. Anyone who says any different is scientifically incompetent and should be ignored for all time henceforth. So give us the excuse to ignore you for all time henceforth, Mohammed. By the way, who's doing a great job himself of ignoring me, pretending like I haven't invited him directly to face-to-face discussion / debate with myself on these topics. First of all, he said, oh, has he invited me? That didn't work because people said, yes, he has. Oh, well, why would I talk to a Google enthusiast? Oh, whoops, he's not a Google enthusiast. He's actually a well-published professor of health science. Oh dear, Mohammed. Mind you, just a once-off professor, me, not a double professor like yourself, Mohammed. So clearly my professorial powers, whatever they might be, must be inferior to yours because you're a double professor and very, very secure in yourself as well, aren't you, son? Yes. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Whew. Ooh. And then, get this, his latest excuse for not fronting me face-to-face for a debate is, well, I'll just cave in and pull out the moment he accepts. Oh dear, Mohammed. Oh dear, you haven't done your background on me at all, have you, son? No, I won't. I'll be here with boots on. I might even be wearing pants. Who knows? In the meantime, we wait for you to accept my challenge for a face-to-face debate, you ignorant turd. Whereupon I will tear you umpteen new assholes regarding anything you want to claim because, sunshine, you lack the scientific nous to even understand that every stupid, ridiculous comment that comes out of your rancid gob is a direct violation of the first tenets of science itself. Cause and effect, you say. Great. Show us the evidence for that. No? You're a theologue. You're a buffoon and an obviously radiant, health-enjoying individual. All right.
So LDL or ApoB specifically, and we'll talk about ApoB and LDL in a second. We know that this happens because Brian Ferentz and his group in 2017, they published an article. They wanted to figure out what criteria needs to be met in order to say with absolute certainty that LDL cholesterol causes atherosclerosis.
Well, they haven't been able to do that. There is no scientific evidence extant anywhere in the literature which can inform us on cause and effect as regards atherosclerosis and cholesterol or LDL or ApoB or any subfraction of any of that. Good, we're done.
Not that we guess, not that it correlates with it, not
but that's exactly what the evidence standard is, though. Evidence standard. What I'm saying is that's what is extant, an indication of some degree of association. Piss weak at best and noisy as fuck, Muhammad, actually, statistically. But the association that we have indicates a curvilinear relationship with a nadir at around 200 milligrams per deciliter in the blood of total cholesterol, associated, not causal, associated. And as you drop below that 220, what you find is a precipitous increase in the incidence of heart disease. And to the right of it, at higher levels, you see as more a function of the curvilinear trend line chosen, actually, more than any data to underpin such a thing, that there is an increase above that to some degree as well. That's what we actually observe. That is the standard of evidence. There is nothing any better than that. That exists. There are people claiming that they're making better inferences on the basis of all sorts of anti-scientific or pseudoscientific at best instruments which they claim to be capable of doing a thing that they cannot do, i.e. inform on cause and effect. You have an inference, you have an appeal to consensus authority fallacy here. What you don't have is any scientific evidence that your claim is so. Still.
That it's a maybe. They said, here is a very strict criteria.
It's not very strict. And it's also quite ambiguous on a number of the criteria steps that were laid out by that author and his co-authors as sponsored very kindly by that list that we saw early on. So what? At that point, I actually have no interest in what they have to say, because you'll also notice that the paper in which they're making these claims is clearly disclaimed and labeled as an opinion piece. Okay? So there's nothing in there except various different forms of associative data, none of which by itself can inform on cause and effect. Ergo, collectively together, it similarly cannot inform on cause nor effect. Still, those are the rules of science. I'm sorry that they don't support your theological belief, Muhammad. Nonetheless, those are the scientific dictates. That is the standard. That is the bar if you want to claim causality, and that is what you're doing. No problem with you coming online and saying, look, we've got this theory around LDL. We think it's pretty good, but we do not have the proof that it is so. Fine. I've got no problem with you. Go ahead and say that. But as soon as you say this is cause and effect and absolutely unequivocally so, now you're out of step. Now you're out of line with reality. Now you are breaching science. Okay, Mr. Double Professor? Right, what's next?
When we look at all types of studies, when we look at all types of data, when we look at all types of anything, how can we know with...
Right, so what we've got there is 3 different kinds of associative data sets, none of which prove a damn thing about cause nor effect at all whatsoever. That's why it's labeled an opinion piece, Mohammed. Okay?
Absolute certainty.
No. Stating we have absolute certainty in our opinion doesn't make your opinion correct, Mohammed. To make your opinion correct and full of veracity, you have to underpin that claim with properly collected, scientifically disciplined data that would underpin that claim. And associative data is not that kind of data. It cannot inform at all on cause and effect, not one jot.
That LDL cholesterol.
There are many things that are associated with many other things. Drownings in swimming pools are highly associated with the release of movies by Nicolas Cage. Does that mean Nicolas Cage causes people to drown in swimming pools when they watch his movies? Not impossible, but I don't think we've actually established causality there, have we? Between the age of 5 and 10 years old, having larger feet is highly, highly correlated with mathematical ability, isn't it, Mohammed? Ergo, we need to stop wasting all this money on training mathematics teachers, and instead, we just need to genetically engineer children to have bigger feet, and that will sort out the inability to do math. Will it, Mohammed? Sunburn and sales of ice creams at Miami Beach, Mohammed. Do we solve the sunburn problem by outlawing the sale of ice creams? Get the fuck out of here. You scientifically illiterate little boy. What's next?
Actually is the causal agent.
No, it isn't. Saying it is doesn't make that so. It is still not.
For atherosclerosis. And
no, it isn't. Still.
Tobias and Williams again proved this because...
No, they didn't. At all. They did no such thing.
Retention. The arteries have the ability to retain LDL cholesterol.
No. That doesn't prove what you've just said. That's a completely different statement. You said that Tobias and somebody proved that this is a causal relationship. No, they didn't, Mohammed. There is no such study that exists.
And then these, open up, dump their cholesterol, and start destroying your arteries from the
No, they don't, still.
Inside out.
No, wrong. False, Mohammed.
So Brian Ferentz and his group wanted to look at what is all the criteria that needs to be met.
No, what Brian Ferentz and his group wanted to do was to cash in on all that lovely, lovely money provided to them by these folks. Remember? Oh, yes. Right. Tell us all about Brian, though.
And they came up with a plan of here's all the things that need to happen in order for us to say LDL cholesterol.
So they made up their own science to determine causality, and then they labeled their paper opinion piece because they haven't actually met the actually existing scientific criteria for cause and effect, and published that. People will accuse me of making my own science up, Mohammed. Isn't this a hilarious way of looking at things, kiddies? Who is it that's making their own science up here?
Cholesterol absolutely causes atherosclerosis.
No, it absolutely does not. In fact, because if it did, then atherosclerotic lesioning would occur evenly across the entire inner surface of both the high and low pressure side of the vasculature, Mohammed. It doesn't, does it? No. So we're still finished with that. It's still wrong, isn't it? There. See, it's actual logic being applied. All right, get some logic up here. No lube.
And they went through bit by bit by bit, and they looked at Mendelian randomization.
Well, that's an oxymoron.
Trials where these are people that are randomized at birth.
No, they're not. Not at all.
Some people have genetics that give them very high LDL cholesterol.
In general, with an error around that guesstimation. What you'll find when you look at the Mendelian studies, Mohammed, is that these studies don't measure the actual LDL exposure in their populations. They guesstimate what it is on the basis of some genetic SNPs. So now what we're actually doing is we're doing association by proxy to the actual thing that we're now pointing the finger at. So it's not stronger than associative work. It's actually weaker, Mohammed. All right? Goodness gracious me. You show me full, uninterrupted area under the curve exposure versus time of LDLC or anything else in these populations of people so that we can make an actual scientific assessment of it. And I'll be interested, Mohammed. Until you do that, again, fuck right off. This isn't science. This is rubbish. This is ridiculous rubbish that only someone with absolutely no competence in science could possibly suck. All right. And so this is why when I come online and say Mohammed Arlo is a scientifically illiterate buffoon without the first clue of what he's talking about, that is why I'm saying so, Mohammed, because it's so clearly.
Some people have genetics that give them very, very low cholesterol, like PCSK9 loss of function genes at the bottom here, where you have you run around with a cholesterol of like LDL cholesterol like 10, 15, maybe 20 for the rest of your life. And people at the higher end where they have an LDL receptor mutation, familial hypercholesterolemia, and other mutations that have cholesterols of like 5, 6, 700 sometimes. So those were one of the ways that they looked at it. They looked at randomized control trials where...
hang on. So they looked at people's cholesterol levels, was what you've just said in this in Mendelian studies, forgetting completely that they actually did no such thing, Mohammed. They did not look at anybody's cholesterol level at any stage, not even once. They looked at some genes and associated those genes with incidence of heart disease without control. They didn't even have homogeneous populations to start with, for goodness sake, by definition. Not science. What's next?
We gave people an intervention to see what would happen if we lowered their cholesterol.
Yes, and did that intervention associate with a change in outcomes? Maybe. Piss weak at best, very noisy, not a strong or convincing signal, but let's just grant you that and say, sure. Sure. We gave them either an HMG coenzyme A reductase inhibitor, statin, or a PCSK9 inhibitor, both of which are known to have the effect of lowering the expression of the genes that make cholesterol, ergo lowering the cholesterol level. Okay? Both those drugs have known anti-inflammatory effect, at least short term, as a serendipitous mechanism of action. Not planned for by those drug developers. They're just serendipitous things that are true in the short term for those drugs. A lowering of one's inflammation will lead to a slowing of the progression of atherosclerosis, or even could lead to some regression. It's an invalidating confound of your ridiculous nonsense. Scientists understand things like confounds, Mohammed, even ones that are only single professor. All right?
Followed them for years. We looked at cohort studies. We looked at, all these other ways of trying to figure out, does this thing cause atherosclerosis.
Yeah, but no associative data set can inform you on that question, Mohammed. A scientist understands that. Still.
Yes, this, magical, ball here. Does this cause atherosclerosis?
Well, the answer is there's no way that we're going to determine that by doing associative studies. None at all. So the answer is we don't know.
And the final conclusion was that with absolute certainty, without question, if you have too much of this, you will get atherosclerosis.
No, that's false. That is a complete misrepresentation of what the science actually tells us on this topic, Mohammed. 180 degrees out of phase with the objective reality in which we find ourselves. Something about which I understand you already understand quite a bit. Don't you? What's next?
Is the causative agent in atherosclerosis.
No, it isn't.
So let me just show you the model that I was talking about and how it happens and why calcium scoring in CT angiograms.
Okay, so you've just said it's causal and you've provided us with absolutely zero evidence that that is so. So we can dismiss your ridiculous claim on the causality. You have not supported it. Fail. Repeat the class, little Mohammed.
Really do not give us the answer that we want. Because a lot of people say, well, my calcium score is 0. Even though my LDL is 300, it's way up here. My calcium score is 0.
So?
Isn't that okay? Like, should I be fine? Aren't I?
That means you have no calcification of your atherosclerotic disease process if you have a CAC score of 0. That's all it tells you.
Fine. I've been eating, a horrible diet full of saturated fat for the last 3 years.
That's not a horrible diet. That's your opinion again, Mohammed.
10 years, whatever, but my calcium score is 0.
Yeah, we get where you're going. Get there.
Okay, so let me show you that model and I'll explain to you why that is not okay. This is a model of what happens to your arteries. Over here on this end is the...
See, this is a model. This is a construct. This is not an artery or any part of an artery. You've already shown us your ability to actually interpret science and understand what causes what and what doesn't and what the science can tell us about that and otherwise, Mohammed. Now you want to put a model, a construct up in front of us and not even understand focal distances on cameras and things. It's hard work, isn't it, kids?
Fully clean, normal artery. You can see the endothelium.
But we could if it wasn't blurry.
It's very, very clean. You could drive a truck through it.
Really? So now Mohammed is showing us that he, like many others of his ilk, is unable to comprehend size.
You start to get to medium range and late stage and end stage atherosclerosis. At this point, it's starting to get narrow. You no longer can pass my finger through it, whereas at the beginning here, you can put it all in there.
I'll leave it.
The arterial wall remodels this way. It starts happening on the outside of the wall. Very rarely does it encroach on the lumen. This is the lumen. When we inject dye into here, like with a cardiac catheterization or a CT angiogram, you see inside here, you do not see inside the walls. It's very hard to see inside the walls. Calcium happens inside the walls. Somewhere around here in this range is when you start having calcium plaque. And
that's right. So calcium, a calcification of the atherosclerotic lesioning, is a sign that that area of lesioning is late stage and not early stage. If you want to be relatively sure that you don't have early stage atherosclerosis, you would also need to combine something like an ultrasound methodology, which is quite good, quite accurate as well. Something that can detect soft tissue stuff going on. Cool. So what? That's still got nothing whatever to do with cause and effect. Because as usual, Mohammed, your only training is in reactive medicine. You think you've been trained in preventative medicine, but basically what's happened is some people have relied upon your complete lack of scientific acumen to tell you a whole bunch of facts about cholesterol, which you're now mindlessly regurgitating to an unsuspecting public who think that because you have a certificate that says you're a cardiologist, that you're actually a cardiologist's asshole. That's the problem here, son.
calcium buildup. So when somebody says my calcium score is 0, they have really late stage disease. They are like right here on this end. This is where you start seeing calcium.
No, you might have a calcium score of 0 and no soft tissue development of any lesioning either.
We're in this transition zone, and it still is not encroaching on the lumen. You can inject dye.
I think you should sit on your hands for the rest of the video, Mohammed. Okay, it's enough of that now.
Whether via cardiac catheterization or CT angiogram, and still they can tell you, oh, your arteries are wide open, your arteries are clear, there's no plaque, there's no calcium, there's no this, there's not. So first of all, CT scans and cardiac angiograms, like when I go into your arteries and inject dye into your arteries, we will not see soft plaque that is in the wall because we are injecting the dye into this area here. The dye.
Stop it.
Dye flows through here, and we get a crystal clear picture that your arteries are wide open. It does not show all of this.
Yes, we understand that. So what you're actually saying is that you're not even competent to find soft tissue stuff, Mohammed, either. Okay, good.
Soft plaque that is building up inside of your arteries, unfortunately. So a lot of people.
So if you can't see it developing, then you can't actually confirm that it's not developing either. We get that. So now you're guessing that it must be developing. Well, no, because a person that lives a self-harmless life, in terms of the real causes of atherosclerosis, will not develop atherosclerosis, Mohammed. And the fact that you can't see it there doesn't mean that it is there, that you just can't see it. It might not be there. Good.
Or like, oh, my calcium score is 0, or
oh, Jesus Christ, can we move on?
Whatever have you it is, we know that that's not true and that it's not protective. So how do we know that you have soft plaque? If your LDL cholesterol is really high, you have soft plaque.
No, false, Mohammed. Not at all. That is an absolute, complete lie. There is no science to underpin that claim whatever.
You look at the PISA trial, the PESA, Prevention of Early Subclinical Atherosclerosis. They did very, very fancy imaging where they looked at people's arteries to try to determine if they have atherosclerosis long before it blocks the lumen and long before it actually is symptomatic.
Mm-hmm.
They looked at young people with no calciums, no obesity, no insulin resistance, very good BMI, not obese, non-smokers, all of that, very healthy young people. They found that people with a pretty normal LDL, or at least what we used to consider normal.
How do they know what the person's LDL was, Mohammed? Can you show me an uninterrupted area under the curve versus time for their LDL exposure? Individually, each one of them, so that we can make a determination on the veracity, goodness of any metric that you would give us around what their LDL was supposedly. Because I've read that trial. It seems like you haven't, or even thought about this for a second. Hang on. This is a study that purports to talk about exposure to an environmental, albeit that an internal environment issue, i.e. LDL cholesterol, and yet they gave us no gauge of what the reality of the situation was with regard to these people's cholesterol level. At all. Not science, Mohammed. You've been fooled again, precisely because you are scientifically illiterate, double professor.
Normal 110. They had a 45% of people with an LDL of 110 milligrams per deciliter had atherosclerosis, subclinical atherosclerosis.
So what?
If you increase that number to 130, which previously that 130 was the upper limit of normal before 2018 when we changed it.
All right, so you can decide what normal is now just by changing what normal is. I wish that I was normal, just the same as you. No, Mohammed. No, because if your LDL is normal because you medicate yourself to get it normal, and this is what your drug does to you that makes you normal, I don't think I want to be normal just the same as you. All right? What's next?
55% of those people.
So fucking what?
Had subclinical atherosclerosis.
So what?
If you went up to 150, add another 20.
So what? This is your associative data set that you're throwing at us right now without actually citing it in any meaningful way or discussing or describing its problems in any meaningful way. This is an associative data set that you're giving us. It cannot inform on cause and effect. Not one jot. Ice cream sales and sunburn, Mohammed.
68% or almost 70% of people had atherosclerosis in these young, healthy individuals.
So fucking what?
That are not smokers, not obese, not overweight, not
We got all of that the first time, and the response is still so fucking what? An associative data set that you've just provided us with. Right. Even if your associative data set is accurate and full of veracity, which I doubt, it does not inform on cause and effect still.
diabetic, not calcium, scored, none of that. They all had atherosclerosis. Not only that, what was even more profound is 63% of them had atherosclerosis in more than one arterial bed. So they had it in their
So?
carotids plus their femoral. They had it in their coronaries plus their femorals, plus their aorta, plus their or whatever they can measure.
So now eliminate the possibility that those people who are expressing that disease process don't, as a result of that disease process, express a higher level of LDL in the blood for some reason. And there's a pretty clear reason why that might occur if you actually have half a brain, Mohammed. Your associative data set cannot inform on cause or effect. Still.
So there's a few other trials that are that looked at these same kind of individuals. There's one called the Cardia trial, CARDIA. They also looked at super young individuals. This is about 5,100 young males, ages 18 to 30. And all they did was and they were also young, healthy, normal BMI,
For Christ's sake.
non-smokers, non-diabetic, all of that. There were some people overweight and some smokers and some people that were diabetic, but it was very low numbers, like less than 8, 9, 10%. They looked at those people and they found that the time to first event was predicted only by LDL cholesterol. So
You mean a one-off test of their LDL cholesterol on one occasion? Or do you mean an area under the curve versus time of their exposure to LDL-C, Mohammed? Are people getting this? This is not science. This is pseudoscience dressed up as science. This doesn't even follow basic logic, let alone, show us some kind of scientific relationship between anything and anything else.
So the higher the LDL cholesterol, the sooner you had your first event.
Right, and now discount the possibility that the reason those people have elevated LDL is something to do with the fact that the disease process is developing and that it is a response to it and not the cause of it. You can't. We're still done here. Oh, this Buffoon is incredible.
Event meaning,
by which I mean singly lacking in credibility, whatever. This is a ridiculous mental midget.
Like heart attack or stroke. So very, very important here. They also found that if this was low, if your LDL cholesterol was low, your time to first event was actually negative.
So impossible then, ergo showing that your trend line is completely inappropriate and divorced from the objective reality in which we find ourselves. And still not causal.
And having your first event based on the data, based on the prediction models of 15 years, it was actually negative. You had it in...
Are you having some digestive distress there, Mohammed? It seems like it. I'd have that seen to by an actual doctor if I was you.
Didn't have one or added another 10, 15 years of event-free.
I wouldn't go to an actual doctor myself. I'm just kidding. Actual doctors. Nope.
Free time. So that was another study. A new one called the PRECAD trial went back and looked at the PISA cohort, did some fancy imaging as well, and they wanted
some fancy imaging, good.
To see how much we could regress plaques by lowering LDL. And they did like 6-year intervals, and they found that the young people.
And how did you lower the LDL?
Who lowered their LDL regressed their...
How did they lower their LDL, Mohammed? How? And did that have an anti-inflammatory effect in some way? Whoops.
Plaque burden pretty significantly. I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I'll link all those studies down here. Pretty significantly just by lowering LDL cholesterol.
No. You've just made a cause and effect claim there, which is not supported by this data set. Other factors were not controlled adequately, remotely. This is pseudoscience, dressed up to look like science, to make the people that wrote it feel important about themselves and give them a reason to have an occupation, largely, but very little to do with informing us on objective reality in which we live in terms of how we should behave in any respect.
No other factors really made a difference. Now,
will you stop playing with your balls? The only ones you've got to play with. I understand, but nonetheless, now is not the time to be playing with your balls.
If you like this kind of talk or this kind of topic,
we don't, Mohammed. We wish you'd shut the fuck up permanently. You are an absolute embarrassment to yourself, to your family, and to your nation. You are the least scientifically credible or worthwhile individual I think I have ever listened to. Pretty much. And that's saying something. What's next?
A new cholesterol book coming out. It's actually called Cholesterol Truths.
Well, it doesn't make anything in your book true, Mohammed, just because you've used the word truth. The same happens when people who write peer-reviewed literature write words and get them past 2 peer reviewers so that they get published. It doesn't make those words correct, Mohammed.
It should be coming out soon. If you go to drallo.net/cholesterol, depending on when you click on this video or watch it, you'll either figure out how to pre-order the book, how to...
Oh, for fuck's sake. Seriously?
Get on the waiting list to find out when it's going to be released. We are like this close to releasing it. Got some pretty big names in the cardiology world. The president of the National Atherosclerotic Society, the European Atherosclerotic Society.
Oh, right. Remember how credible those people are? Yep, good.
The top educator in lipids and lipid metabolism.
Well, hang on a minute. The top educator in lipids, you say? According to whom? He's not. He's a buffoon.
Dr. Thomas Dayspring is on the book as a co-editor, actually. We've got...
Lame Norton. There you go. The top experts. Lame Norton. Good. A bloke who can't correctly state or apply the first law of thermodynamics, even, Mohammed, let alone understand science. Goodness gracious. Woo!
Lane Norton. We've got Dr. Patty Barrett. We've got Alan Aragon.
Alan Arrogant, did you say?
Just Simon Hill, even.
Simon Hill? Simon Hill? Yeah, okay, right. All the top experts in the world. This is why I say that you are a ridiculous vegan apologist, Mohammed. I didn't say you are a vegan, which you falsely claimed. I said you are a vegan apologist. Have a look, boys and girls. Make your own mind up, because these are the folks that Arlo thinks are the top people. Lame Norton. Anyway, good. What's next?
Lots of these, people who are super evidence-based.
Oh, fuck. No.
Matthew Nagra.
Keep going, son.
I'm sure I'm forgetting some people. Terry Simpson, Matthew Phillips, all of these physicians, cardiologists, people in the healthcare, nutritionists, people with PhDs and all of these sciences, all on board supporting this book and endorsing it heavily. So I highly recommend go to drallo.net/cholesterol. You can grab Cholesterol Truth, find out when it's coming out, when you can order it, and I hope to see you in the next episode. If you have questions, drop them below.
Why would anybody ask you anything, Buffoon? Why? Unless they themselves are absolutely destitute of the first clue, 3 or 4 brain cells, and some common sense.
Answer almost every single question.
Probably because you don't get many. Right, there we have it, boys and girls. Mohammed Arlo, not a fucking clue, has he, boys and girls, at all? No. All right, join me next time when someone else will be wrong on the interwebs, because it doesn't look like slowing down anytime soon, does it? No.